and welcome back to another episode. Today we are starting on our journey through not time and space, not a distance, but through the legacy of the beast, the legacy of I'm of course talking about Iron Maiden. And we're going through their first album, their debut album, and they're one of a couple bands that I know that have an album that's self-titled, named after themselves, like Black Sabbath. They have a song on the album titled after the album that's named after themselves. So there's 3 degrees there that you're going through with Iron Maiden by the band Iron Maiden on the album Iron Maiden. We'll get to that one when we get to it, but let's start off with a little background information on the band Iron Maiden. They started with a newspaper ad. Steve Harris, their bassist, put a newspaper ad out looking for bandmates around Christmas of 1975, and on Christmas. So Iron Maiden and Santa Claus both share a very special day of Christmas, December 25th. Uh, that's when the band started in 1975, and so the band went through a couple of different lineup changes at this point, but the main lineup of this period for the band is Steve Harris on bass, Paul Di'Anno as the lead singer, Dave Murray and Dennis Stratton as guitarist and rhythm guitarist, and Clive Burr on the drums. Now this lineup would change after the release of this album. They would fire Dennis Stratton and they would replace him with Adrian Smith, but we'll talk about that more when we talk about Killers, which is their next album after this one. But as you can see, the album art is a little different on the CD that I have. It looks, the original album art, of course, is on my t-shirt. This is one of the rattiest shirts I own. It's not the oldest Iron Maiden shirt I own, but it is one of the rattiest ones. It looks like I got shot with a machine gun in the back of it. So I don't wear it too often, but I'm wearing it here for you. So you can see the original art actually there on the disc. You don't get a bunch of goddamn glare there, but you can see Eddie, the electric kid, done by Derek Riggs, who I've met and is wonderful. But this is the updated artwork that they did. I've already said I don't really like it. I don't understand why the hell they changed it, but it doesn't really make sense. Here's a nice little pop figure of the original Eddie. If you saw at the beginning of the video, he's very wonderful. He keeps me company at night. And just put him back there. So the band played for about 5-ish years. They got a recording contract and they recorded the first album. It came out in the UK on April 14th, 1980. So that's when this album came out. It came out in the US a little bit later, but the UK release date is the one that I go with. And so the track listing between the UK and the US version is a little different as well. The US version flips some of the songs. There's no new songs. There's no songs that are cut or anything. It's just the track listing is slightly shifted for the US release. I go by the UK release because when I put this on my computer, it comes up as the UK release, or the UK track listing. So that's the one I go by. That's the one that you should go by. I'm sure it doesn't really matter, but that's the one that Iron Maiden would go by. And so we'll start off with just some of the stuff. Will Malone was the producer for the album. It wasn't Martin Birch, who would come on later, and really engineer the band's sound to what it should be. This album, it doesn't sound amazing. The production, the overall songs themselves, the compositions, they're great for what they are. It's a great first album, but it's not what Iron Maiden really is to me. And that lends itself because Paul Di'Anno is the singer and it's not Bruce Dickinson and it's not Blaze Bayley. Now that's not to say that Paul Di'Anno Iron Maiden is not Iron Maiden. It's different to me. This first album is wonderful. It's a masterpiece, but it is not as good as the albums to come. So we'll go through the track listing here, and so we'll just go top to bottom, and then we'll go through individual songs like I did on the written version of Iron Maiden-A-Thon. So let's hit it. We've got Prowler, Sanctuary, Remember Tomorrow, Running Free, Phantom of the Opera, Transylvania, Strange World, Charlotte the Harlot, and they finish up with Iron Maiden. So the The various songs here, they're more aggressive, they're faster, they're shorter than a lot of the other Iron Maiden songs that you might think. Um, for the people out there that don't know a lot of Iron Maiden, The Trooper, Run to the Hills, Number of the Beast those are great songs, but those don't really reflect overall all of what Iron Maiden is. Iron Maiden is a very progressive band. They have very long, intricate songs, especially in their later career. This album is more of like a heavy metal, punk rock, baby album, basically. Um, Paul Di'Anno, after his career in Iron Maiden ended, he actually went on to become a very progressive singer. He's not a progressive kind of guy. He's kind of a fucking dickhead, but his solo work is pretty damn good. If you ever get the chance to listen to it, maybe I'll record a video about it or something like that. But we'll just start off. We'll start off with Prowler, and if you want to go along on the track list, pause me, go listen to it on their official channel. You can go through. They have playlists with all their albums on it. It's for free. So go through, listen to Prowler, come back. I'll do that for the rest of the song, so I won't say it, but pause me, go back, come back. So Prowler, it starts off, it's a very aggressive song, it's very hard and driving, and it's not really like a quintessential Iron Maiden song to me. It's nice to listen to, it gets you kind of pumped up, but there's just something about it, I don't want to say it's too aggressive because it's not too aggressive, but it's a little too aggressive for me. I don't know, for Iron Maiden. It's a great song. I haven't heard them play it live before. I don't think they will again. A lot of these songs on the Di'Anno albums, I don't think they'll ever play live again. You get Iron Maiden, the song, every concert. You might get Running Free, or you might get Sanctuary, and on special occasions you might get Phantom of the Opera, but the rest of them you're not going to... It's not going to happen. They just won't play it. They have too much to get to in any given concert. But Prowler, it's a pretty good song. It's not my favorite Iron Maiden song, but whatever. Sanctuary is a song that they usually, when they play it, it's at the very end of the set. It's the last song that they play. It's very short on the album, but when they play it live, it's more extended. It's sort of like a way to get the crowd just that one last pump before they, hightail it out of there. It's kind of generic. It doesn't really have like the fantasy sort of sci-fi lyrics that you would think that Iron Maiden would have. That's what the first two albums, Iron Maiden and Killers, kind of share, is that the lyrics, except on certain songs, we'll get to one later, except the lyrics are they're more about urban living and running away from the police and committing crimes, and it doesn't really fit with the rest of Iron Maiden that you would think of, where there's, literary references and movie references and song. There's the entire song about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner that if you listen to it, you'll actually learn about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This album and Killers, there isn't really, it's not there. So Sanctuary fits into that. It's sort of like about an urban escape from the police, and yeah, it's a good song. It's good to hear. Di'Anno singing these songs, except for one coming up, maybe two coming up. Bruce doesn't really do it better than him, but what can you do? You're not going to have Paul Di'Anno singing in Iron Maiden anytime soon. The next song, Remember Tomorrow, it's sort of a slower song. It's longer. It's more reminiscent of the actual, what you would think of with Iron Maiden, but it doesn't quite get there over the top. It's a great song, but the production of the whole album sort of takes it down, because you would think that you would want this big, beautiful production of it, and it's sort of subdued, and it's, the guitars are really, I don't know music production, but they sort of, they're lower on the track, or they, it's a great song, but this album remastered or remixed it's been remastered, but remixed it'd be heresy, but it might be better. I don't know. Re-recorded. They've re-recorded a couple of these songs with Bruce, and they actually they don't sound better than the original, but they sound good. They're from certain eras, so you can tell which era they're from. Running Free is like Sanctuary. It usually closes out shows, but this one it's a glorified way to get like a catch and release with the audience. It's another urban sort of running away from the police, going out and going to get hammered and going to a fucking disco and all that. It's not their best. Live, it's wonderful. It gets the crowd pumped, and as soon as you hear the drums, and the The live versions of this song are much better than the studio version, in my opinion. The live version on Live After Death is one of the best live recordings of all time. And then the live version on Live at Donington from 1992 is also really good, and that's a great video because it's the first time that Adrian Smith came back to the band, even for one song. And so you can sort of see what Iron Maiden's all about on stage and all that with that video. It's perfect. Um, Phantom of the Opera is my favorite song off this album. It's my favorite Di'Anno song. It's in my top 10 Iron Maiden songs. I think Bruce sings it better. But this is what Iron Maiden is all about. This song right here, Phantom of the Opera, is what the band is all about. It's fantasy. It's hard and it's driving, and it's not as aggressive, but it is a hard and heavy metal song. And so it's the best song on this album. It's one of my favorites. It's in my top 10. It gets you pumped. It tells a story. It's just perfect in every single way. This one overcomes the production problems. It overcomes sort of Di'Anno when you think about him compared to Bruce. It's perfect. Transylvania is an instrumental, and it sort of sounds sort of piratey-ish. It's an instrumental. I don't you can't. I like listening to it. It's a pretty good like pump up thing. They play it. Though at least on the Legacy of the Beast tour, they played it before they even start the concert. They show like the Legacy of the Beast sizzle trailer or whatever, and they play the song. They've played it live. They haven't played it live since like 1990 something. It's on the Real Live. Oh my God, how am I forgetting the name of it? Real Alive, Real Dead tour. Pardon me. Oh my God. It's on one half of that. It's okay. I wouldn't want to hear it live just because it's an instrumental. It'd be a waste of a track, but it's good as an instrumental. I love instrumentals, but just not live. And Strange World is another song that's sort of like Remember Tomorrow, except it kicks into gear faster, starts off slow, but it's a showcase of Di'Anno's talent as a singer, and he is talented. He's a gigantic asshole, but he's talented, and he shows it on this album. Like this album, without Paul Di'Anno in Iron Maiden, there wouldn't be an Iron Maiden. We wouldn't have a chance to have Bruce Dickinson in the band, and we wouldn't have everything else after it. So if you're getting something from this that I don't appreciate Paul Di'Anno's contributions to Iron Maiden, I do a lot. I love these two albums. They're just not my favorite. Go figure. Strange World's part of that. I think it's probably the weakest song on the album, if you're counting it as a song with, if you don't count Transylvania or whatever, I don't know. I think it's the weakest song on the album. It's good. It just is eh. Charlotte the Harlot is the first of a 4-piece of songs about Charlotte the Harlot, who, depending on who you ask, is either a real prostitute or not. And so it's sort of a happy, fun, fast song. It's about a prostitute, so the subject matter isn't the high fantasy that you'd think of, but it's okay. It's the next song in her sort of run of 4 songs, I think, is the best one. That's 22 Acacia Avenue off of Number of the Beast. We'll get to that when we get to Number of the Beast, but this is a great start. It's a good song. And then finally, it is not complete. It's not an Iron Maiden show. It's not an Iron Maiden album without the song Iron Maiden. And so Iron Maiden, it tells the story of, I don't exactly know, maybe it's the actual medieval torture device, who knows. But it is not their best song, but somehow it overcomes that, and it overcomes everything, and it is timeless. When you see Iron Maiden live, you know you're going to see Iron Maiden. You know it's going to be the last song of the main set before the encore. It's always like that. It always will be like that. And if they change that, it would be very weird. Bruce Dickinson and everybody on the band, they say goodnight. They say hello, goodbye. In certain cases, like on the Brave New World tour, if you've seen the Rock in Rio video, they have a gigantic Eddie wicker man that they light, some virgins up in flame behind them on it. But usually it closes out the main set of the show, and it is in Di'Anno's version. I think it's a good studio track, but you really feel the passion and the energy of the song when you hear it live. And with a lot of songs that is the case, and with some songs it's not. But if we're going through, Let's just go through one more time. Prowler, Sanctuary, Remember Tomorrow, Running Free, Phantom of the Opera, Transylvania, Strange World, Charlotte the Harlot, and Iron Maiden. My favorite song on the album is Phantom of the Opera. It's not close. The weakest song on the album is Strange World, which, if Strange World is your worst song, then you're doing something right. Um, but yeah, that's it's you can hear the beginnings of what's to come. You can hear in the songwriting, you can hear it in the instruments, you can hear it in the playing. The production is not so great, but you can hear what is to come, the beast that is awakening from this album. And one thing that I find interesting is whenever I think about this album, one, I always think that the release date is 1977 for whatever reason, but it's 1980. Two is that this album came out in 1980. This came out in the 80s, and Metallica's Kill 'Em All came out 2 years after this. So, you had Iron Maiden, you had Killers, and you had Number of the Beast out by the time I think Kill 'Em All came out. And so Iron Maiden, by that third album, are already ruling the world of heavy metal. Every metal band wants to be Iron Maiden. They want to have two guitarists like Iron Maiden, and I know Thin Lizzy and Judas Priest had the two guitarists before, but Judas Priest perfected it, Iron Maiden perfected it, but later, whatever. But bands wanted to be them. They wanted to be Iron Maiden. They wanted to make music just like this, and Killers coming up. And so when you look at a band's first album, a lot of the time it is, oh, well, it's their first album, but it doesn't really sound like them, and this album, it doesn't really sound like them, but it does. On certain tracks, you can really hear it. On Phantom of the Opera, that is a trip to show you what is to come for the band, and so it's not their best album, it's not a perfect album, but it is the album that launched their careers. It is the album that we wouldn't have a band, I wouldn't have this t-shirt, or this figure, or anything Iron Maiden related without this album. And so for that, I appreciate it. I love listening to it. You should appreciate it. It's an amazing album. And if you haven't heard it before, give it a listen. Give it a listen all the way through, too. Don't just pick and choose the greatest hits, because you'll hear something like Running Free and you'll go, what the fuck is this? But then you'll hear something like Phantom of the Opera or Iron Maiden and you'll be like, well, oh my God, this sounds like Iron Maiden. So just give it all a chance. That's basically what I'm saying here. Rambling about it, but I'll just go ahead and show you the little booklet that's included here too with it, so you can see some of the pictures of the band and what they looked like in their youth. But yeah, there's them with the Iron Lady. That's what Steve Harris looks like. The bassist, the man that runs the show. There's Dave Murray. There's what Mr. Diano looks like. Apparently Iron Maiden in this period were an amazing killer live show. Like, just absolute, just energy, just blowing off the stage into everybody. There's great look at them. There's Dennis Stratton, the only album that he plays on, but thank you for your contribution to Iron Maiden. We'll go through, they all wearing black leather jackets and looking really cool, and then, yeah. It was produced in December of 1979. There we go. If I didn't get to that. This album is a landmark in the history of heavy metal. It's a landmark in the history of Iron Maiden. It's a landmark in whatever else you want to say, hard rock and heavy metal. It signals a point where the new British invasion, whatever the hell you want to call it, new wave of British heavy metal, are starting. It's the genesis of that. You have Def Leppard, you have Iron Maiden, you have like Tigers of Pantang, you have Saxon coming in. But this album was the first one. They didn't make it big in the United States until later, but this was the first one. It signaled what was to come, and it's really fascinating in that way, and you can listen to it from a lens of just like, what would this have sounded like in 1980? You go to the record store in April of 1980 and you go and buy this. What would it sound like? It's interesting to think of stuff like that, but it is a landmark, and it has classic songs on it. It has songs that you'll always hear when you see Iron Maiden. It has songs you will never hear when you see Iron Maiden. But it's one that you have to, as an Iron Maiden fan, appreciate and remember and listen to. And so with that, I will say good night from me, good night from Eddie, and we'll be on to Killers after this. Thanks for watching.